Turns out, the best gift my godmother ever gave me wasn't the $340,000 inheritance. It was watching my husband's face when her lawyer read aloud exactly why she called him that parasitic waste of a good last name in her final will and testament. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind to the moment I learned that Opal Whitmore, the only mother figure I'd ever known, had died peacefully in her sleep on Tuesday, February 7th. I was coordinating a wedding at the Hyatt on River Street when my phone rang. The hospice nurse's voice was gentle, apologetic, like she was returning a damaged package. My godmother was gone. I excused myself, locked myself in the hotel bathroom, and cried so hard a bridesmaid knocked to ask if I needed Pepto-Bismol. Troy's reaction when I got home? "Oh, babe, I'm so sorry." Then, approximately 45 seconds later, "Did she have life insurance or anything?" I should have packed my bags right then, but grief makes you stupid, and I'd been married to Troy for 8 years, long enough to mistake his emotional unavailability for stoicism and his selfishness for practicality. He'd been a sales manager at a tech startup for the past 6 years, the kind of guy who wore khakis to barbecues and called everyone champ. We lived in a modest 2-story colonial in Savannah's historic district, the kind of house that looked charming on Instagram, but had plumbing that made horror movie sounds at 2 in the morning. Opal had raised me after my mother decided motherhood wasn't her calling and disappeared when I was 7. Opal was a retired librarian with a subscription to every true crime podcast, a wicked sense of humor, and zero tolerance for nonsense. She taught me how to balance a checkbook, change a tire, and recognize red flags in men, a lesson I apparently slept through. The call from Hugh Calloway came 3 days after the funeral. Troy answered because I was still in that fog where showering felt like climbing Everest. I heard him say, "Yes, this is her husband," in that smooth voice he used with clients. Then his tone changed. "Wait, how much?" Pause. 340,000? Another pause. "That's incredible news." He hung up and practically skipped into the bedroom where I was drowning in tissues and old photo albums. "Babe, that was your godmother's lawyer. She left you a huge inheritance. 340 grand. I blinked. Opal had been comfortable but never wealthy. She'd worked her whole life at the Savannah Public Library, lived in a modest bungalow near Forsyth Park, drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic she'd named Gerald. Where had this money come from? "Community property, babe," Troy continued, sitting on the bed with an energy I hadn't seen since last Super Bowl Sunday. "Georgia's not technically a community property state, but we're married. What's yours is ours, right? We can finally renovate the kitchen, maybe get that boat I've been looking at." A boat? My godmother had been dead for 72 hours and he was shopping for boats. "The lawyer wants us both at his office Tuesday morning for the will reading," Troy said, already pulling out his phone. "I'm gonna request the morning off. We need to make a good impression, show we're responsible with money." Responsible. This from the man who'd blown $4,000 on a timeshare presentation in Orlando because the sales guy called him a sharp investor. Tuesday morning arrived with Troy acting like we were going to a job interview at Goldman Sachs. He woke up at 5, tried on 3 different suits, and kept asking if his tie made him look trustworthy and financially savvy. I threw on a black dress, the same one I'd worn to Opal's funeral, because apparently I was still in the acceptance phase of grief while Troy had speed-run directly to boat ownership. The law office was located in one of those converted historic buildings downtown, all exposed brick and chandelier lighting that screamed, "We charge $500 an hour." The receptionist offered us coffee in actual china cups, not styrofoam, which Troy took as a sign that we were dealing with serious money now. Hugh Calloway met us in a mahogany-paneled conference room that smelled like old books and furniture polish. He was exactly what you'd picture for a Southern estate lawyer. Silver hair, seersucker suit despite it being March, and an accent thick enough to spread on biscuits. "Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Mercer, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to leather chairs that probably cost more than our mortgage payment. "I want to express my condolences. Opal was a remarkable woman and a valued client for over 20 years. Troy nodded solemnly like he hadn't spent those 20 years avoiding Opal's phone calls. Hugh opened a leather folder and began reading in that measured lawyer voice. "The house went to me. The jewelry collection went to me. The car, poor Gerald, went to me. The savings account, investments, and life insurance policy all went to me. Troy's smile was getting tighter with each sentence, his jaw working like he was chewing invisible gum. Now, Hugh said, his voice shifting slightly. Mrs. Whitmore left specific instructions regarding a sealed letter to be read aloud in the presence of Mrs. Mercer's spouse. He pulled out a cream-colored envelope with Opal's handwriting on it. Troy stood up abruptly. I actually need to hit the restroom real quick. Hugh made a subtle gesture with his hand, and that's when two security guards quietly moved to position themselves by the door. Troy froze mid-step. The restroom can certainly wait, Mr. Mercer, Hugh said, his smile pleasant but his eyes sharp. This is part of the formal testamentary protocol. Please sit down. Troy sat. His legs started bouncing like a jackhammer. Hugh broke the seal on the envelope, unfolded 3 pages of Opal's neat cursive, cleared his throat, and began to read. My dearest Joelle, if you're hearing this, it means I've finally kicked the bucket and can now haunt that miserable excuse for a husband of yours from the great beyond. I inhaled sharply. Troy went pale. I'm going to be direct, because death has freed me from the burden of politeness. Troy Mercer is a cheating, lying, parasitic waste of a good last name, and I have spent the last 3 years of my life making absolutely certain you'd find out exactly who you married. The room went silent except for the sound of Troy's heavy breathing. Hugh continued reading, unfazed, like he was reciting the weather forecast. Hugh adjusted his reading glasses and continued in that same steady southern drawl, like he was reading a recipe for peach cobbler instead of detonating my entire marriage. 3 years ago, I hired a private investigator named Morris Kleinfeld. Not because I'm a paranoid old woman, but because Troy smiled too much for a man married to you, Joelle. Happy husbands don't check their phones every 14 seconds at Thanksgiving dinner. They don't volunteer to run to Publix for cranberry sauce and come back 3 hours later, smelling like perfume that costs more than their wife's Christmas present. I remembered that Thanksgiving. Troy had insisted the store was packed, said he'd gotten stuck in holiday traffic. I'd believed him because I was basting a turkey and dealing with Opal's questions about why we still didn't have kids after 7 years of marriage. Troy's face had gone from pale to a concerning shade of gray-green. He looked like a man watching his execution in slow motion. The investigator's report is attached as Exhibit A through Q. Hugh continued, flipping to show a stack of documents thick enough to choke a horse. But let me summarize the highlights for efficiency's sake. Troy has been involved in an extramarital relationship with one Shelby Preston, in her late 20s, for approximately 4 years. 4 years? Half of our marriage. I'd been planning anniversary dinners while he was planning a double life. Miss Preston resides at the Magnolia Court Apartments on Abercorn Street, Unit 304. The lease is in Troy's name. Monthly rent is $1,800. Paid from a checking account Troy opened at Regions Bank in July 4 years ago. An account you knew nothing about, Joelle. Troy tried to speak. This is... Hugh held up one finger. Mr. Mercer. Interrupting the reading of a will is technically contempt of testamentary proceedings. I'd advise silence. I don't think that's actually a real thing. But Troy shut up anyway. The security guards shifted their weight. One of them was definitely trying not to smile. The relationship produced a child, Hugh read, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped 15 degrees. Troy Mercer Jr., born April 14th 2 years ago at St. Joseph's Hospital. Birth certificate lists Troy Michael Mercer as father. The child's first birthday party was held at Chuck E. Cheese on Eisenhower Drive, which Troy attended while telling you, Joelle, that he had a mandatory sales conference in Atlanta that weekend. I remembered that weekend. I'd been at a bridal expo all day Saturday, came home exhausted, and Troy had sent me a photo of his hotel room and room service dinner as proof of his business trip. Turns out he'd been eating pizza and playing skee-ball with his secret family, while I'd been explaining to bridezillas why we couldn't get live doves for an outdoor May wedding in coastal Georgia. The investigator obtained copies of text message exchanges. Hugh continued, pulling out another document. I won't read all of them because we'd be here until Thursday, but let me share a few representative samples. March 23rd, Troy to Shelby. Can't wait to see you tonight. Told the ball and chain I have a client dinner. May 9th. At least at your place I don't have to pretend to care about her boring job. August 2nd. She's talking about renewing our vows for our anniversary. Kill me now. That one hit different. I'd suggested renewing our vows. Troy had said it seemed excessive, and financially irresponsible. Apparently saving money only applied to things I wanted. October 17th, Hugh read, Troy to Shelby. The only reason I'm still in this marriage is because divorce is expensive and her godmother is loaded. Once the old lady dies, I'm out. There it was. The truth delivered in 14 words. I wasn't a wife. I was an inheritance strategy. Troy finally found his voice. Those messages are taken out of context. Mr. Mercer, Hugh said, his southern politeness evaporating like morning dew. I have examined every single message in this file. Thousands of them. There is no context in which I married the wrong sister becomes acceptable, especially since Joelle doesn't have a sister. One of the security guards coughed to cover a laugh. Hugh flipped another page. The financial analysis alone is remarkable. Over 4 years, Troy has diverted approximately $95,000 to support his secondary household. This includes rent, utilities, groceries, a car payment for Shelby's Nissan Altima, and various gifts documented via credit card statements. The money came from multiple sources. Cash advances on credit cards opened solely in his name that Joelle didn't know about. Loans from Troy's parents. Told them it was for a business opportunity. And my personal favorite, the $15,000 Joelle loaned Troy 3 years ago to invest in what he called a foolproof tech startup. I remembered that. I'd pulled money from my savings account, my emergency fund that Opal had helped me build. Troy had shown me a professional-looking website, talked about ground floor opportunities and exponential returns. I'd trusted him because that's what wives do, apparently. Turns out the only thing he invested in was adultery and furniture for Shelby's apartment. Now, Hugh said, his voice taking on an almost cheerful tone, here's where Opal's planning becomes truly inspired. She knew all of this information would devastate you, Joelle. She also knew that if she simply told you, Troy would deny everything, gaslight you, maybe even convince you the investigator was wrong. So she waited. She waited until she died, until you were grieving and vulnerable, until Troy showed his true colors by immediately asking about money. She waited until this exact moment, with legal witnesses present and documentation that would hold up in any divorce court in Georgia. Troy was sweating now, actual beads of perspiration running down his temples despite the air conditioning. The will includes several protective clauses, Hugh continued. First, the inheritance is classified as separate property under Georgia law, acquired by gift from a non-marital source. Troy has zero legal claim to it. Second, if Troy attempts to contest this will or make any claim on Joelle's inheritance, Opal has authorized me to distribute copies of the complete investigative report, all 17 volumes, to the following parties. Hugh pulled out a list. Troy's employer, Vanguard Tech Solutions. His parents, Lorraine and Dennis Mercer. His sister Mabel and her family. The congregation at First Baptist Church where Troy serves as a volunteer usher. And finally, a sponsored post on Lorraine Mercer's Facebook page, which has approximately 843 friends, most of whom live in Savannah and love nothing more than well-documented gossip. Troy's mother was the queen of church circle drama. This would destroy him socially in a way that nothing else could. There's more, Hugh said, because apparently we hadn't hit rock bottom yet. Opal updated her life insurance policy 6 months ago. She added Troy as a beneficiary. Troy's eyes lit up for half a second. The pathetic hope of a drowning man seeing driftwood. The amount is $1, Hugh finished. She included a note suggesting you frame it, Mr. Mercer. As a reminder. The security guard by the door actually snorted this time. Hugh folded the letter carefully. Opal's final instructions to you, Joelle, are as follows. Use this money to hire the best divorce attorney in Savannah. Buy yourself something beautiful. Take that trip to Italy you've been dreaming about since you were 16, and forget this man exists. Her exact words. You deserve someone who loves you at least half as much as I did. Troy Mercer doesn't deserve to pronounce your name. The room went silent except for the sound of Troy's ragged breathing and the ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Hugh closed the folder and looked at me with something like kindness. I've taken the liberty of preparing divorce paperwork. It's ready for your signature whenever you're ready. I've also compiled a list of recommended attorneys who specialize in high-conflict divorces, though, given the evidence, I expect this will be relatively straightforward. Troy finally stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You can't just... This is insane. She can't do this from beyond the grave. Mr. Mercer, Hugh said quietly. She already did. And unless you'd like me to start making phone calls right now, I'd suggest you leave this office and give your wife some space to process. The security guards moved toward Troy. He looked at me, actually tried to reach for my hand. Joelle, baby, we can work through this. I pulled my hand back like he was radioactive. Get out. He left. The sound of his expensive shoes echoing down the hallway felt like the closing credits of the worst movie I'd ever been forced to watch. After Troy left, Hugh handed me a bottle of water and a box of tissues like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. Maybe Savannah was full of women discovering their husbands were living double lives while the Spanish moss swayed romantically outside. Take your time, he said. I've cleared my afternoon. I didn't cry. That was the strangest part. I'd cried for 3 days straight when Opal died, but sitting in that leather chair surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, I felt nothing except a weird sense of clarity. Like I'd been watching a movie with terrible audio and someone finally turned on the subtitles. The divorce attorneys, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Who's the best? Hugh smiled. Vera Kingsley. She's expensive, aggressive, and has never lost a contested divorce in 23 years. She'll eat Troy alive and send the bones to Shelby as a warning. Set up a meeting. Already done. Tomorrow at 10, if that works for you. I nodded, then looked at the 17 volumes of investigative reports stacked on the credenza like an encyclopedia of failure. Can I take those? They're yours. Opal paid for them. She also paid for my services in advance, including any divorce proceedings. You won't owe me a cent. Of course she did. Opal had planned this like a military operation, and I was just now realizing how many moves ahead she'd been thinking. I drove home in a daze, the reports filling my trunk like body disposal evidence. Troy's truck was gone from the driveway, probably at Shelby's, crying about how his evil dead godmother-in-law had ruined his life. Our house looked the same as it had that morning, but everything felt different. The front door we'd painted together 3 summers ago. The porch swing where we'd drunk coffee on Sunday mornings. All of it was just set dressing for a play I didn't know I was performing in. I spent that night reading. All 17 volumes. Morris Kleinfeld was thorough to the point of obsession. He'd documented everything. Dates, times, locations, credit card receipts, hotel room numbers, the works. There were photos of Troy and Shelby at restaurants I couldn't afford, holding hands at movies, pushing a stroller through Forsyth Park on a Tuesday afternoon when Troy had told me he was in Jacksonville for a sales meeting. But it was the financial documents that made me angry. Really, truly angry. The kind of anger that starts in your chest and spreads like wildfire until your hands shake and you have to stand up and pace. Troy had taken a loan from his parents for $18,000, told them it was for a down payment on rental property investment. He'd used it to buy Shelby a used Nissan Altima. He'd opened credit cards in his name only, racked up $43,000 in debt buying furniture, clothes, and baby supplies. He'd cashed out his 401k early, paid the penalty, and used it to cover Shelby's hospital bills when Troy Jr. was born. Meanwhile, I'd been clipping coupons, shopping at TJ Maxx, and skipping lunch twice a week to save money for the kitchen renovation Troy said we couldn't afford. The next morning, I met Vera Kingsley, Hugh's top recommendation, at her office in a converted Victorian mansion on Charlton Street. She was exactly what Hugh had promised, mid-50s, perfectly tailored suit, hair that defied humidity, and the energy of a prosecutor who'd just been handed a confession. "I've reviewed the preliminary documents Hugh sent over," she said, pouring us both coffee from a French press that probably cost more than my car payment. "This is the cleanest adultery case I've seen in a decade. We could have you divorced in 90 days. What about his debt?" I asked. "The credit cards? The loans?" Vera's smile was the kind that probably made opposing counsel nervous. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, not community property. Debt incurred for the benefit of the marriage is shared. Debt incurred to fund an affair and secret child? That's all his. We'll make sure the judge knows every dollar he spent on apartment 304. His parents gave him $18,000. They think it was for investment property. Do they know about Shelby? Not yet. Vera leaned back in her chair. "Here's what I recommend. We file for divorce on grounds of adultery, which affects alimony calculations in your favor. Not that you need his money now. We include a complete financial disclosure showing his debt and where it went. We request he be solely responsible for all marital debt since you can prove you had no knowledge or benefit from it. And we do it all very publicly. Publicly? Courthouse filings are public record. Savannah's a small town, especially in certain social circles. Word travels. Troy serves as an usher at First Baptist, correct? I nodded. How long until the church ladies start asking questions about why his wife is divorcing him for adultery? How long until his boss at Vanguard Tech Solutions hears about the secret child? Hugh mentioned Troy's mother is socially active. Lorraine runs the women's auxiliary. She has opinions about everything and shares them loudly. Perfect. We let the truth do the heavy lifting. No need to be vindictive when facts are devastating enough. I hired her on the spot. She had papers drawn up by Thursday. I signed them Friday morning, and Troy was served Friday afternoon at his office by a process server who apparently handed him the envelope during a sales team meeting. Hugh had connections. Troy showed up at the house that night, banging on the door like he was auditioning for a cop drama. I didn't answer. I'd changed the locks that afternoon. Turns out locksmiths in Savannah work fast when you pay cash and mention your husband has a secret family. Joelle, open the door. We need to talk about this like adults. I watched him through the window. This man I'd been married to for 8 years, and felt absolutely nothing. It was like watching a stranger have a breakdown on someone else's lawn. He finally left when my neighbor, Mrs. Drummond, came out and threatened to call the police. She was 78 and had no patience for melodrama after sunset. The next week was a blur of legal meetings, document signing, and sorting through 8 years of marriage to figure out what was mine, what was his, and what I just wanted to set on fire for therapeutic purposes. Vera was a machine. She filed motions, requested financial disclosures, and scheduled depositions with the efficiency of someone who genuinely enjoyed destroying cheaters. Troy tried to call more than 60 times. I blocked him. He sent emails. I filtered them to spam. He showed up at my office at the Hyatt, and security escorted him out when I told them we were in the middle of a divorce. His parents called. Lorraine left a voicemail asking what lies I was spreading about her son. How dare I disrespect their family? Didn't I understand that men make mistakes, and forgiveness is godly? I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. His sister Mabel texted, "Whatever Troy did, this seems extreme." I sent her a PDF of the investigative report. She didn't respond. The preliminary divorce hearing was scheduled for late April, 3 weeks away. Vera said it would be routine. Temporary orders for property, finances, no contact provisions. The real show would come later when we went to trial if Troy was stupid enough to contest. He'll contest, Vera predicted during one of our meetings. His ego won't let him accept this quietly. He'll want his day in court, a chance to explain himself, make you look unreasonable. They always do. Let him, I said. I've got 17 volumes that say otherwise. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Troy and I started dating. I made plans without considering anyone else's schedule or opinion. I called my best friend Tessa, who'd moved to Charleston 2 years ago, and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said, "Pack a bag. You're staying with me this weekend. We're going to drink wine, eat seafood, and remind you that you're a whole person without that parasite." I went. We drank wine. We ate she-crab soup. We walked along the Battery and talked about the future instead of dwelling on the past. Tessa had always thought Troy was mediocre at best. She'd called him aggressively beige at our wedding, and she didn't pretend to be sad the marriage was ending. Opal was a genius, Tessa said Sunday morning over coffee. She gave you money, evidence, and a roadmap out. Not many people get that kind of exit strategy. She was right. Opal had given me everything I needed except one thing: the satisfaction of watching it all fall apart in real time. That part I was going to have to create myself. The preliminary hearing arrived on a Thursday morning in late April, unseasonably hot even for Georgia. The Chatham County Courthouse smelled like floor wax and broken dreams, and Troy showed up wearing his best suit with Shelby on his arm like this was a corporate networking event instead of the legal dissolution of his marriage. Bold choice. Bringing your mistress to divorce court. Very bold. Vera saw them walk in and her eyebrows went up approximately half an inch, which for her was the equivalent of pointing and laughing. "He brought her," she whispered. He actually brought her. This is the best gift he could have given us. The judge was a woman named Claudia Reeves, mid-60s, with reading glasses on a chain and the expression of someone who'd seen every possible flavor of marital disaster. She reviewed our filings, looked at Troy and Shelby sitting together in the gallery, then looked at me. Mrs. Mercer, you're requesting temporary orders that your husband vacate the marital residence, that all joint accounts be frozen, and that you maintain sole possession of property purchased prior to discovery of adultery. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Mercer, you're contesting these requests on the grounds that the marriage can be saved through counseling, and that the inheritance your wife received should be considered an asset distribution. Is that correct? Troy stood up. Yes, Your Honor. I made mistakes, but I love my wife. We can work through this. And the money from her godmother— Judge Reeves held up one hand. I've read the investigative reports submitted as evidence, all 17 volumes. I also note that you brought your extramarital partner to this hearing, which suggests your commitment to reconciliation is questionable at best. Shelby's face went bright red. Several people in the gallery, mostly there for other cases, turned to stare. Your Honor, Shelby is here for moral support, Troy stammered. It's complicated. I'm sure it is, Judge Reeves said dryly. Particularly for the 2-year-old child you fathered during your marriage. Temporary orders are granted as requested. Mr. Mercer, you have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings from the marital residence. Mrs. Mercer will provide reasonable access. Joint accounts are frozen pending final settlement. The inheritance is clearly separate property and will not be considered marital assets. We'll reconvene for trial in 90 days unless you reach a settlement agreement. Next case. Gavel down. 8 years of marriage reduced to 3 minutes of judicial efficiency. Troy tried to approach me in the hallway. Vera stepped between us like a perfectly tailored guard dog. All communication goes through me now, Mr. Mercer. You have my number. He left with Shelby, and I watched them walk away. Him angry, her crying, both of them dealing with consequences that apparently came as a surprise. The real fireworks started 3 days later when Troy's parents showed up at my office. Lorraine and Dennis Mercer, arriving unannounced during my lunch break, looking like they'd been summoned to the principal's office and were very displeased about it. Joelle, we need to talk about these ridiculous accusations, Lorraine announced, not bothering with pleasantries like greetings or basic human decency. Troy explained everything. You're blowing this out of proportion because you're upset about your godmother dying. He made one mistake. One mistake? I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. Lorraine, he has a 2-year-old son with another woman. He's been paying for her apartment for 4 years. He used the $18,000 you loaned him for investment property to buy her a car. Dennis went pale. What? The Nissan Altima you probably saw him driving around? Not a company car. His mistress's car, purchased with your money. Check the loan paperwork. He said it was for rental property investment, remember? Lorraine's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. That's not— Troy wouldn't— I pulled out my phone, opened the PDF Morris had compiled, and showed them a photo. Troy and Shelby, at the Nissan dealership, signing papers, dated 3 years and 10 months ago. $18,000 check from Dennis and Lorraine Mercer visible in the transaction documents. Dennis sat down heavily in one of my office chairs. He told us it was a real estate opportunity. Said he was building our retirement security. He built Shelby's transportation security instead, I said. There's more if you want to see it. Photos, receipts, bank statements, birth certificates, 17 volumes worth. Lorraine looked like someone had replaced her son with a stranger. Does our church know? Not from me, I said honestly, but divorce filings are public record. I imagine people are starting to ask questions. They left without apologizing, which tracked. The Mercers didn't apologize. They recalculated. I gave them 3 days before they cut Troy off financially. I was right. It took 2. Troy called Vera's office in a panic on Saturday morning. His parents had demanded immediate repayment of the $18,000 plus interest. His credit cards were maxed out. Shelby was panicking because he couldn't make rent at Magnolia Court. His boss at Vanguard had called him in for a meeting about reputation concerns after someone, definitely not me, probably Mrs. Drummond, mentioned the divorce situation at a Rotary Club lunch. He wants to settle. Vera told me during our call. He'll agree to all terms, take full responsibility for all marital debt, waive any claim to your inheritance or property, accept a no-contest divorce. He just wants it done quietly. What's he offering in exchange? He wants you to not distribute the investigative reports to anyone else. He's worried about his job, his standing at church, his parents' social circle. I thought about it for approximately 4 seconds. No. I won't actively distribute them, I clarified, but I won't sign any non-disclosure agreement. If people ask me what happened, I'll tell them the truth. If his employer requests documentation for their internal review, I'll provide it. If his church wants to know why I filed on grounds of adultery, I'll explain. Natural consequences, not revenge distribution. Vera laughed. Actually laughed. You know what? I'm putting that in the settlement language. Respondent requests no active distribution of documented evidence. Petitioner agrees not to proactively distribute, but reserves right to respond honestly to direct inquiries and comply with legitimate third-party requests. He's going to hate it. Good. The settlement was finalized in mid-May. Troy signed everything Vera put in front of him, including an agreement that he was solely responsible for $95,000 in debt, that I kept the house, the car, the furniture, and every single thing Opal had left me. He got his clothes, his golf clubs, and the privilege of explaining to everyone why his marriage imploded. The natural consequences rolled in like a hurricane. First Baptist Church quietly asked him to step down from his usher position. Apparently, adultery and secret children conflicted with their family values mission statement. Vanguard Tech Solutions put him on a performance improvement plan after 3 major clients asked to be reassigned to different sales reps. Word had traveled through Savannah's business community faster than kudzu in July. His parents stopped speaking to him entirely after Lorraine ran into Shelby at Kroger, and realized the woman shopping with a toddler who looked exactly like Troy was the reason they'd lost $18,000 and they're standing at the country club. Mabel, his sister, sent me a text in early June. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you immediately. Coffee sometime?" I took her up on it. She'd always been decent, just loyal to her brother before she knew the full story. We had lunch at the Collins Quarter, and she told me Troy had moved in with Shelby, that the apartment was too small for 3 people, that Shelby was realizing being the wife was different from being the mistress, and that Troy Jr. cried every time Troy raised his voice. "He's miserable," Mabel said. "And I know I'm supposed to feel bad for him because he's my brother, but honestly, he did this to himself." "Yes," I agreed. "He really did." The divorce was finalized on June 28th, exactly 90 days after the preliminary hearing. I didn't attend. Vera handled it. Troy didn't contest anything. The judge signed the order, and just like that, I was Joelle Whitmore again. I'd taken back my godmother's name. That night, I booked a flight to Rome. 3 weeks in Italy, traveling from Rome to Florence to Positano, staying in small hotels Opal would have loved, eating pasta I didn't have to share, and walking through museums without checking my phone every 5 minutes to see if Troy needed something. I sent Mabel a postcard from the Amalfi Coast. It said, "Turns out divorce looks great on me. Wish you were here." She texted back a photo of Troy at a family barbecue, looking exhausted while Shelby argued with Lorraine in the background. The caption, "Wish I was there too." 6 months after the divorce, I'm sitting on a terrace in Positano watching the sunset turn the Mediterranean into liquid gold, and I finally understand what Opal was trying to teach me all along. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's simply living well while someone else deals with the consequences of their own choices. Troy texted me last week. I don't know how he got my new number, probably Mabel, but the message was exactly what you'd expect. "I hope you're happy now. You destroyed my life." I deleted it without responding, because here's what I've learned. You can't destroy what someone dismantled themselves. I just refuse to help them hide the rubble. According to Mabel, who sends updates I don't ask for but secretly appreciate, Troy's life has become a case study in natural consequences. He's still at Vanguard Tech Solutions but got demoted from sales manager to regular sales rep after missing quota 3 quarters in a row. Turns out it's hard to schmooze clients when half of Savannah knows you as that guy with the secret family. His income dropped 20%, which makes the $95,000 in debt he's solely responsible for even more suffocating. Shelby discovered that being the official girlfriend is wildly different from being the exciting secret. The apartment that seemed cozy for romantic weekends feels cramped when you're living there full-time with a toddler who inherited his father's talent for selective hearing. She got a job at a dental office to help with bills, which means Troy Jr. goes to daycare, which costs almost as much as Shelby makes, which creates arguments that the neighbors can hear through the walls. Between her income and Troy's reduced salary, they're barely keeping their heads above water while the debt sits there like a financial anvil. Lorraine still won't speak to Troy. She sends birthday cards to Troy Jr. because the child is innocent in all this, but addresses them to Shelby's apartment with no return address, like she's smuggling contraband into a witness protection program. Dennis occasionally has lunch with Troy but refuses to loan him money, which apparently is Troy's primary definition of paternal love. First Baptist Church replaced him with a younger usher who doesn't have a documented history of moral flexibility. Troy tried attending services at a different church across town, but Savannah's religious community apparently has a better communication network than the NSA. He stopped going altogether. The house, my house now, got a complete renovation courtesy of Opal's inheritance. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, fresh paint in colors I actually like instead of the beige Troy insisted was resale neutral. I hosted Thanksgiving there last November. Tessa came from Charleston, Mabel brought her husband and kids, and Mrs. Drummond from next door stopped by with a pecan pie and stories about her own divorce in 1987. We laughed so hard the neighbors probably thought we were having a party, which I guess we were. A celebration of survival. I'm still working as an event coordinator, but now I'm doing it on my terms. I turned down 3 Bridezilla clients this year because life's too short to manage other people's unrealistic expectations while ignoring my own needs. Opal's money gave me the freedom to be selective, to say no, to remember that my time has value beyond whatever someone's willing to pay for it. The Italy trip changed something fundamental. I spent 3 weeks eating obscene amounts of pasta, drinking wine at lunch like a civilized European, and having conversations with strangers who didn't know anything about my story, except what I chose to tell them. In Positano, I met an artist named Luca who painted the coastline and spoke exactly enough English to flirt effectively. Nothing serious happened. I'm not ready for that. But it reminded me that attraction exists outside of 8 years of gradually lowering standards. I've started saying no to things that don't serve me and yes to things that scare me. I took a pottery class and made bowls so lopsided they're basically modern art. I joined a book club that actually reads books instead of drinking wine and gossiping, though we do plenty of both. I adopted a cat from the shelter, a grumpy orange tabby I named Gerald after Opal's car, which I donated to a charity that helps single mothers get to work. Gerald the cat judges me constantly in a way I find comforting, and unlike his namesake, he doesn't need an oil change. People ask if I'm angry. The answer is complicated. I was angry, furious, actually. But rage is exhausting to maintain. Now I'm just grateful. Grateful Opal loved me enough to orchestrate this escape. Grateful she waited until she wasn't here to see my pain, but made sure I had everything I needed to move forward. Grateful Troy was stupid enough to bring Shelby to court, to use his parents' money for an affair, to leave such a comprehensive evidence trail that even his own family couldn't defend him. Opal taught me that revenge doesn't require elaborate schemes or public humiliation. Sometimes it's just refusing to carry someone else's shame, declining to minimize their choices, and walking away with your dignity and bank account intact. She gave me permission to let Troy drown in the life he built while I learned to swim in deeper, better waters. The last time I visited her grave at Laurel Grove Cemetery, I brought flowers and a photo of me in Positano, standing on that terrace with the Mediterranean behind me, smiling like someone who finally remembered she deserved to. I like to think she saw it somehow, that wherever she is, she's satisfied with how her final project turned out. Troy made his choices. Shelby made hers. I made mine. The difference is, I'm the only one who gets to sleep peacefully at night in a house that's actually mine, with a cat who only judges me for not feeding him fast enough, planning my next trip because I finally understand what Opal knew all along. The best life is the one you build for yourself, not the one you settle for because leaving seems too hard. Some days I still can't believe it took my godmother dying to finally start living. But here I am, alive in ways I forgot were possible, and honestly, that's the best revenge of all.